Hello, one and all, and welcome to my very first fountain pen review. Just to introduce myself, I'm Pen Throw Dart, which is my Reddit handle as well. I first came across fountain pens when I was in primary school in England. I was in forced writing implement when I was a child, and I wrote with them for some years, and then I fell off, as we tend to do. I reacquired the hobby 2 or 3 years ago, but I haven't really started collecting seriously until a few months prior. And among my new acquisitions is this Majohn Ti136. Now, this is essentially the titanium version of the Majohn P136, which in itself is an homage to the Mont Blanc 146, if we're generous with that description. Now, this pen comes in several different finishes. The regular smooth titanium, or the hammered polished version, which we have here, or the hammered matte version. The pricing ranges from around 88 euros for the base model up to 160 or 170 euros depending upon the nib that you would like. You can request it from a standard Moonman or Majohn extra fine to a medium, as well as a hand polished medium, and then a long knife nib ranging from, I think, a 0.5 to 0.7 millimeters in line width. I ordered this from 365 Stationery on AliExpress, with whom I am by no means affiliated. Took roughly 16 days by AliExpress standard delivery from date of purchase to arrival here in Ireland. It came with the hand polished medium that I ordered, as well as a two-tone fine Majohn nib and a regular fine Majohn nib, which came at no extra cost to myself. I also ordered the P136 wrench tool, which was roughly 8 to 9 euros and separate to the cost of the pen, and the reason for this comes in later. Now, how I came to acquire this pen comes with somewhat of a story. I first came across this pen when I was looking into titanium pens in general, and there have been quite a few coming out of the Chinese market of late. The first one I came across was the Asvine J16, which is similar to this Majohn in some respects and quite different in others. The first significant difference is that, of course, the Asvine J16 comes with a section that's threaded to accept JoWo number 6 nib units, and as such can accept a variety of different specialty nibs that, like the ones you can order from Franklin Christoph, and indeed that did enter into my thinking when I was looking at the J16 initially, as I had wanted to try their star metallic gradient nibs that they produce in-house. The J16 is a different color scheme to the Majohn. It comes in a polished or brushed titanium, but is all chrome, in that the body is titanium and the trim is silver. It also has a different ink window, which is all grey and loops around the whole pen body. It is also, however, still a piston filler, similar to the Majohn. Now, I'm sure the J16 appeals to a great many people. However, for myself, the all chrome color scheme just didn't quite scratch the itch for me, and the all grey ink window just didn't look all that appealing to me, to be honest. And even with the Jowo threading, I have plenty of other Jowo pens, and I didn't see the need for another. So when I was coming across the J16, I also found the Majohn Ti136. I first saw it on a video by Doodlebud of YouTube fountain pen fame. And he did a good review on the pen, both the regular finish as well as the hammered finish. And I was quite close to purchasing it outright based on that video itself. I think that was last year. Now, at the time, circumstances were that I didn't really need another pen. And I didn't have the loose cash to buy this pen, so it sat in my AliExpress cart for close to a year. Now, I attended the London Pen Show earlier this year, which was coincidentally the very first pen show I attended, and there were plenty of pens, both new and old, on display. At one of the vintage pens shops that set up in the pen show, I noticed a pen that looked quite similar to this. That would be the Mont Blanc Martelet Legrand, which is essentially a Mont Blanc 146 in full sterling silver with silver trim and a similar hammered finish. It carries an 18 karat gold nib, and is a very nice piece. I got the chance to pick it up, hold it, feel the heft of the pen, and certainly it was a lovely pen to hold in my hand. Then I asked the price, heard it, put the pen down, and swiftly walked away. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who wouldn't bat an eye at spending £3,500 on a single item, but for me, it's a bit hard to justify, and certainly, even for a pen with the aesthetics and the provenance, I'd be hard pressed to really justify that purchase. And so I walked away from it. However, that encounter with the Martelet brought my memory back to the Majohn Ti136, and I was still of two minds of buying it until I saw another video on YouTube by a gentleman who goes by Shaq MD. Produced quite a good video showing how I could improve this pen by swapping out the nib unit with some non-native nib units, and as a consequence some altogether different nibs to try out. And I'll go into that a little bit further down the track, but that essentially convinced me that this was a good pen to invest into, and led to my purchase. So we'll just go into a few things here in a general overview of how this pen is put together. In terms of the length, I don't have a Mont Blanc 146 to compare as a direct comparator, but I do have a Mont Blanc 221p to compare. It's a bit shorter there, as you can see. And here's a Diplomat Aero, which I purchased back in December of last year. Again, a bit shorter. And lastly, just for comparison, I have a Visconti Van Gogh Starry Night, which again, much shorter whilst capped. I won't uncap this pen as yet, as I want to keep some secrets for later. But we can have a look at a few more things here. In terms of the weight of the pen, it's a metal pen, so naturally heavier than a acrylic or celluloid pen. For example, this 3776 Platinum Hong Kong edition, which is special to me, much lighter than this pen here. Now, of course, still not that heavy as compared to the Diplomat Aero I have here, which is the oxide brass version, which is extremely heavy in the hand. This is much lighter, and I've had no problems with strain on my hand whilst writing with this over the past 2 weeks. In terms of the grip section, I'll just show that to you briefly there now. Rather short, I think. Now it's not a textured grip section. It's just raw titanium here. It's not been micro abraded to give a more grippiness to it, but still no instances of slippage really. It's a good feeling on the hand, or a good feeling against the fingers there, and I haven't had any trouble with maintaining the grip on the section, even with its shorter length. Now the grip section here leads up to the threads, which are somewhat sharp, but you don't feel them if you grip onto the section itself. Now, of course, if you have a higher grip, then that might be a problem for you if you have particular sensory annoyances with things like this, but it really shouldn't be much of a problem. Moving up the pen then, here you have the ink window, which is somewhat difficult to appreciate at the moment as the pen is fully inked up, but it has a natural blue tint to it, which I have my own thoughts and opinions towards, which I will go into later, but it does have an ink window, so you can see when the pen is close to empty. It's inset, which you can appreciate there compared to the rest of the pen body. Moving up again then, this is the piston knob. This is a piston filling pen. You unscrew, so that's anti-clockwise, to press the plunger down the length of the body, and then you twist clockwise again to pull ink up into the pen. In terms of design features, obviously the most visually appealing part of this pen is the hammered finish, which is unique and distinct from even other instances of the Ti136, as this is hand finished. This is not machine done, as I understand. So this is a unique and distinct pen. The trims are all in gold, as you can see, which again distinguishes it from the Mont Blanc pen and also the Asvine J16. Here you can read Majohn Ti136, Majohn Ti136. Of course, if this was a Mont Blanc pen, you'd have Mont Blanc and Pix on the side instead. Now, with the more general features and design aesthetics out of the way, I want to go into something that makes this pen a little bit more special and makes it, in my eyes, a worthwhile purchase. So I spoke earlier about Jack MD's video in which he reviews this pen and does a few modifications to this pen, which make it quite exciting. This pen comes with this P136 nib unit, which is designed specifically to fit into this pen. And this is the hand polished medium nib that I ordered that came with the pen. Now, in Jack MB's video, he actually demonstrates that the section in this pen also accommodates a Bach 250. This is a spare one from Hex Pens, from a DNA Lucent pen that I purchased earlier this year as well, whilst at the London Pen Show. And you can appreciate that there's a difference in the actual length of the nib unit, the diameter of the nib unit as a whole, and a difference in the threading on the nib unit. But in fact, if you try to screw this nib unit into this pen, it screws in no problem and works quite well. And in Shaq MD's video, he demonstrates this with a flexible Nib Factory custom Bach 250 housing unit, which was custom made to accommodate a Pelican M800 nib, and that screwed in no problem and wrote quite deliciously. And in fact, that was what I intended to do as well. I in fact did purchase a Pelican M800 nib, which I removed from its original collar and placed inside its new custom Bach 250 housing, and I was going to put it into this pen. However, whilst the pen was in transit and whilst the nib and the housing were in transit, I saw on one of the comments that apparently a Montblanc 146 nib would fit inside this P136 nib unit with no problem, and it would use the original Majohn feed here as well with no problem. And I was quite intrigued by this, and on a lark, I went to the PenSwap Reddit and purchased a Montblanc 146 medium nib unit, well, a nib only, from a lovely user there from America, and that cost me roughly $150 before shipping and before import tax. Now, I'll show you the fruits of my labors here now. So this is that Montblanc 146 nib installed inside a Majohn P136 nib unit, and you can see how nicely that fits inside it. The feed there, if the camera would focus, fits very flush to the nib. There's not a gap whatsoever. And in terms of alignment on the tines of the nib, it's difficult to fully appreciate on the video, but I assure you it is quite good. And that's one of the big reasons why I have fallen so much in love with this pen. It's got quite a lot of customizability. Of course, the flexible nib factory offers that Pelican M800 nib inside a Bach 250 housing unit, but they also offer a number of different custom housings where they have, I think they have a Yovo 6 custom housing where you can put a Yovo nib inside that Bach 250 and have that fit into here no problem. Now, of course, that's an additional expense, but I think it's more than worth it for the customizability. One additional thing I'll mention here is that I saw some talk of a Montblanc 146 nib being compatible inside a Bach 250 housing, and I did try this before replacing the Mont Blanc nib into the P136 housing, and it fit to some degree. However, I would not consider it a good fit. It sat quite far forward on the feed. You can see how the nib is sitting quite nicely and sort of fairly close to its original intent on the 146, whereas whilst it was on the buck, the writing here was around where the hex pen logo is now, so it's sitting fairly far forward, and the tip of the pen was a fair distance away from the end of the feed. Now, there wasn't a huge amount of dryness with that, but it just wasn't a very sturdy fit, and I found it sort of shifting inside the Bach 250. So I can't recommend that you put a Mont Blanc 146 into a Bach 250. To me, it just doesn't seem like a sturdy or good fit. As with all good pen reviews, I'd be remiss if I did not offer a writing sample. Now, of course, the writing sample will be one of a Mont Blanc 146, but I wanted to demonstrate how it keeps up with this particular Majohn feed. So, start off, and pardon my illegible cursive scrawl now. So this is the Majohn Ti136 hammered finish with a medium nib coming from a Mont Blanc 146, aka the Legrand. And this is the 14 karat two-tone nib. The ink here is Diamine's Majestic Blue, which is a nice rich navy with a reddish purplish sheen, which you may be able to appreciate here, but I may bring up to the camera shortly so that you can appreciate it better. Horizontal and vertical, diagonal lines, and this pen, well, this nib actually has quite a bit of flexiness, as vintage pen nibs are wont to have, so that is no pressure there. And if I were to apply a bit of pressure, you can see that how that widens up quite nicely, and if I offer a little bit more pressure again, wider again. Quite nice, isn't it? Now you can appreciate it even better with a few figure eights, so that's no pressure whatsoever. And now with pressure. And you can see how that opens up very nicely, and the Majohn feed has no trouble keeping up with the flexiness of this nib and lays down a good amount of ink on the page. Now for the classic scribble, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And that's the writing sample. I'm just going to cap the pen. I'll bring that up so you can appreciate the sheening on that ink, which is very nice, I think. Having gone over the writing sample, some of the general features, and also the particular nib swapping that I've done here, I'd like to offer some of the pros and cons of this particular pen. I think the first and foremost pro on the list is the aesthetics of this pen. As you can see, the hand finish is very appealing and very pleasant to the touch. And some people don't like the gold and a gold on chrome finish of this particular pen, but I quite like it. I like how the gold breaks up the otherwise monotonous chrome that would come with a all silver pen, and I think that it works very well with this two-tone nib as well from Montblanc. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the material of this pen. Now, I have a particular predilection towards titanium pens. I think it's a great material to work with in terms of making pens. It's a good amount of weight. It's not too heavy as other pens can be, like the Diplomat Aero in oxide brass. And it's a good amount of heft whilst still remaining light enough so as to offer no significant strain on longer writing periods. And in my job, for which I write quite a lot, it's given me no problems whatsoever. The size of the pen is also quite nice. It's not particularly too long, but it fits very comfortably in my hand, and I have rather large hands. You can't particularly appreciate it here, but you'll have to take my word for it. And it sits very comfortably in the crook between my thumb and forefinger, and I can grip the section without having to bunch up my fingers like that. It's very nice. As I said before, the options for nib swapping are excellent. The ability to swap on a vintage Montblanc nib onto this particular pen with no issues with the feed keeping up with the nib are excellent. And for someone who can't either afford or justify spending £3,500 or even more than that on euros for a Montblanc Martelet Legrand, I think this is a more than acceptable alternative for those who are craving that delicious hand finish but don't want to spend a fortune. As I said before, this accommodates a Bach 250 unit, so even if you don't want or need a Montblanc nib in this pen, you can fit a Bach 250 nib of your liking into this pen. I think there's plenty of different titanium nibs which would fit the whole titanium construction of this pen. And as I said before, the Flexible Nib Factory offers a wide variety of Bach 250 housings that accommodate different nibs, such as the Pelican M800, the Sailor nibs, and the Yovo nibs. Some of the cons now. Now, as I said before, the section is a bit smaller than other pens. On here, I can grip the section with my thumb and forefinger, and it's comfortable for me, and I don't much mind the threading here. And I can't particularly feel it either as I hold and write with the pen. Now, however, if you have a different kind of grip than mine, or you have a slightly higher grip, then you might feel some of that sharp threading against your fingertips, which might not be a pleasant sensory experience as you write. And I suppose mileage may vary on that. Another thing on the thread, this is a full titanium pen, as I said, and the threads are correspondingly all titanium. This titanium thread threads directly onto the titanium inside the cap, and once it reaches the end, there's nothing really much to tell the pen to stop other than the threads being finished, and so it's kind of a tight fit. A tight fit, but then also paradoxically unscrews rather easily, and there's kind of an unpleasant sound as you screw and unscrew this pen, and there can be some squeaking, which is not the most pleasant sound. Now, there are other pens where there might be a silicone O-ring on the end of the threads, so as that when you get close to the end, as you screw the pen in, it bites into the silicone O-ring, and that sort of friction between the silicone and the pen sort of keeps the lid locked in. And I think that's a bit more of a sort of a pleasant sensory experience, as to be really sure that the pen will stay locked into the body, you kind of have to screw it in a little bit tighter, and it's not the most pleasant thing, and certainly like I don't think that you'll run the risk of like destroying the threads here, but it's still not a pleasant sensory experience. Another thing to be said here is that there's no internal lining on this cap here. It's a full titanium all the way down, and you can see the screw down at the base of the cap, which screws into the top finial here. Now, that hasn't been a huge problem, but there have been some times where, as I said, this does not screw in firmly as other pens, and then a combination of this and the fact that there's no internal lining on the cap can make this pen a little bit more prone to dry out. And it has happened maybe once or twice in the last 2 weeks that I've been using this pen. Now, of course, I have a wide selection of pens. I normally have all these slots filled up, and I don't use every single pen every single day. I sort of pick and choose, but there have been days where I went to use this pen and there's been a bit of dry out that's taken a good few shakes to get going again, and I'm not sure whether that's 100% just down to the dry, just because there have been a few days since I last used the pen, or because of the issues I've mentioned. Last little thing, as I said, the ink window here is tinted a sort of a light blue color, and now if you're using a blue ink like the Diamine Majestic Blue, it's not going to be a huge problem for you. However, if you want to use a different color of ink, which I want to do at times, I'm a fan of sort of dark crimson reds and dark purples, such as the Diamine's Writer's Blood, or Monbotto's Hat, or Octopus Fluids' Gin ink, which is a purple ink with gold sheen. You're not going to get that showing through on a blue window as much. To be honest, I think all ink windows should be clear, and that's the only way you're going to really appreciate the color of the ink within. And having it pre-tinted a certain color is a choice that I don't particularly understand, but sure, it's made anyways. One last thing, I suppose, is the piston and sort of the ink capacity of this pen. Now, the piston is a little bit janky at times, and I don't know whether that's just because I haven't lubed it up with silicone grease, or it's just the way that it's designed, or it's a QC problem. At times, it feels a little bit weird as you unscrew the piston. It doesn't feel as responsive, as in, like, I've unscrewed it there and there's an odd clicking sound. It spins around, and it's not as responsive as other pistons, I think, that I've had. And the capacity on this pen is not huge. I haven't taken the time to exactly measure it, but after a page or two of writing, I feel like the ink capacity is diminished by half, because when I bring the pen up to have a look through, that ink window is usually empty, and I'm not sure whether that's just me not deploying the piston correctly, or the ink capacity is just a little bit on the lower side. So that's the pros and cons of this pen. As I said, lots of things to love about this pen, aesthetic wise, functionality wise, with this nib and ability to swap in other nib units, and some gripes of sort of a more nitpicky variety, I suppose. I love this pen, to be honest. In the last 2 weeks, I've used it fairly often, and it now has a semi-permanent home in my pen roll, until I grow bored of it, I suppose. But I don't think that'll happen for many months to come. Now, I recognize that this is not the cheapest of pens. Even as a base model without the alterations, this can run you from anywhere from €160 up to 170 plus euros, depending on the nib that you choose. And should you wish to swap in alternate nibs, so that will run you an additional cost. Having said that, still a damn sight cheaper than the Montblanc Martelet Legrand. So that's my first fountain pen review. I thoroughly enjoyed using this pen, going through the features of this pen, and I would love to discuss it further. If you have any questions about what I did with the Montblanc nib, or some of the other customization with the Bach 250s. I hope to review another pen soon, and I'll speak to you later.